Bloodvale Court, Case File 001, The Ashbone Pact. Chapter 1, The Return. They found her barefoot at the crossroads. No footprints, no memory of how she arrived. She was pale, her black hair clotted with ash and clay, her dress torn, clumsily stitched. She said nothing, she only stared at the moon. The registry gave her name, Ellen Droska, age 8, declared dead 6 years ago. Half a body was buried, cause, animal attack, the rites performed, the marker carved, the grief documented, the case closed. And yet, here she stood, alive, unaging, her eyes black as obsidian, eyes that did not swallow light, but waited for it to kneel. The magistrate's guards brought her in without struggle. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then the first candle went out, and the second. The old hound by the hearth, blind, deaf, half mad, rose to its feet. It whined once, and hurled itself into the fire. By the time his fur stopped burning, the court had called us. I am Veyron, scribe third order, assigned to inquiry under the Bloodvale Court. With me, Judge Iller, and Agent Varnon, assault binder with a ale clearance. We arrived on the 9th dusk. The villagers had already sealed their homes, shuttered their windows, snuffed their lanterns. Some swore they saw her shadow before they opened their doors. Others claimed they heard her humming, though she had never spoken a word. Containment was attempted, a ring of salt and iron, drawn with ash. She stepped inside. The line curdled, not burned, not broken, rotted, like it had been buried for weeks. When I asked her name, she turned her gaze on me. And in that moment, I felt something I had never felt in 20 years as a scribe, the urge to forget everything I had ever written. The villagers will not speak her name. They called her only one thing. Ash. Chapter 2, The Bonnebinder. We traced the records. Ellen's burial had been prepared by a licensed bonnebinder, Sarah Varn, of Black Marsh. Her work was clean, ritual sealing, marrow speech, minor necromantic closure. Her credentials were spotless, until they weren't. 5 cycles ago, she vanished from the registry, not struck, not expelled, she simply stopped. No trace, no work, no word. Her disappearance matched Ellen's burial date. Witnesses claimed Sarah wandered the ruins of Ashbourne Chapel, condemned, abandoned, yet villagers swore they saw a red thread in its trees, symbols burned into its stones, lanterns glowing in a place with no congregation. When asked about her, most went silent. Only one spoke, an elder who had not spoken in 3 years. He whispered, "She's still listening, to the bones." We searched the chapel. It was a corpse. Roof collapsed, roots strangling its walls, the altar shattered. But beneath the rot, a spiral stair. It should have ended in storage grips. Instead, we found preparation. Sarah and Varn sat within, calm, unshaken. Around her, a circle of ash and tiny bones. Red threads knotted above her head, the seals of grief. She looked up at us and said, "I expected you sooner." We read the charges: unlawful resurrection, veil interference, bloodcraft without sanction. She nodded. It wasn't resurrection, she said. It was remembrance. We detained her without struggle. During processing, she spoke once more. "You don't understand what she is. She isn't a spirit, not a soul. She's an echo. What the veil remembers, when the living forget." When pressed, she described the ritual. 3 elements: ash from her own burned hair, a tooth from the girl's remains, and a word never written, only whispered, beneath the 3rd full moon. She called it a memory binding. I asked the veil to give her back, she said, and it did, but not as she was, as she's needed. Chapter 3, The Whisper in the Ash. The girl, Ash, remained silent. She sat in the holding chamber, eyes lowered, never sleeping, never eating. Her breath never fogged the glass. Twice, the lanterns died, new wicks, fresh runes. It made no difference. We rotated scribes every hour. Exposure caused headaches, nosebleeds, visions. Scribe alone swore she was humming inside his skull. Her lips never moved. The council ruled her uncontainable. Clause 7 invoked. That night, she vanished. The chamber intact, the seal unbroken, but the cart was empty. In her place, one black fetter. Later, the guards admitted they had no memory of her at all that night, only the smell of smoke, and lavender. Her first reappearance was Settle. A candle stall collapsed. The vendor saw a child's shadow. When he looked, nothing remained, except a word carved into the wood. Remember. By the sixth dusk, dreams spread, flickers in glass, ash in the mouths of the living, tiny handprints on window panes. And then, the magistrate. He was found upside down, throat cut clean, no blood spilled, only soup beneath him. His journal read, "She showed me what I forgot. I saw her burn. I saw myself turn away." The chamber locked, windows sealed, but the air smelled of lavender and smoke. We returned to the chapel. The walls hummed, pressure behind the ears. We placed our hands on stone, voices answered. Whispers, names, lullabies, forgotten graves, forgotten dead. And one name louder than the rest, Ellen, Ellen, Ellen. She had not simply returned. She had brought memory with her, and memory has weight. Chapter 4, Pact and Judgment. Sarah and Varn stood trial, chains of veil steel, salt thread. Calm, steady, no fear. When asked her role, she answered, "I remembered her, that was all, the veil did the rest." The judges were unanimous. Verdict, guilty by invocation. Sentence, unbinding. Before judgment, she asked one thing, to see the girl, just once more. The request was granted. She was led to the black cell. Ash was waiting. For 1 hour, silence. When guards returned, Saren lay on the floor, eyes open, smiling, dead. In her hand, a sprig of lavender, tied with red thread. Ash was gone, no breach, no trace. From that moment, things shifted. 13 scribes mute within a week. Sketches of the girl made them weep, tremble. The high scribe seized while reading the transcript. His last words, "We brought her back by forgetting her. Now she will not let us forget again." The case was declared veil-linked, class, unknown. Ellen's remains were dug up, burned, sealed in black glass. The chapel collapsed. But sightings spread. All was the same, a barefoot child at dusk, eyes catching moonlight, ash on pillows, windows shattering from within. And a name whispered, by those who should never have known it, Ellen. There was no storm, no army, no plague. Only a memory, walking, on legs that should never have grown back. Chapter 5, the case is closed. The final report was written in red wax. Subject known as Ash reclassified. Veil-bound echo. Type, unknown. Containment, impossible. Intervention, ineffective. 3 judges invaded in dreams. 1 woke speaking a dead tongue, a morning dialect for forgotten children. When asked his name, he said, "I don't remember, but she does." That night he was found dead. On the wall above him, chalk of bone ash spelled, "She remembers, so we don't have to." The file sealed, her name stricken from registry, the town warded, the tongues of the court bound by silence. But those of us who are there, we know. Because she does not hide anymore, she walks the roads of nameless graves. She lingers in towns that paved over death. She enters homes where mourning has been replaced by forgetting. She is not spirit, she is remembrance given shape, a warning. I, Scribe Veyron, leave this testimony under shadow seal, though it may cost me my voice, or my reflection. Last night, I saw her. In the brass plaque of the veil vaults, her reflection stood behind me. She raised one hand and mouthed a single word, "Remember." When I turned, she was gone, but the plaque stayed cold. Case File 001, The Ashbone Pact, closed. Subject, uncontained. Influence, spreading. This is not the end. This is the first knock on the door. Epilogue, The Lost Diary of Saren Varn. Recovered from the charred remains of Ashbourne Chapel. Entry 1, Day 1, The Weight of Silence. The bones speak, but no one listens. I seal grief in marrow and thread, but the silence grows heavier. Each binding is a story untold. How many must I bury before the veil breaks? Entry 5, Day 7, The Red Thread Hymnal. A tattered book, a hymn of blood in ash, said to bind a memory beyond death. Forbidden, yet I cannot turn away. Entry 12, Day 14, Whispers in the Ruins. The chapel hums beneath my feet. At night, the children plead. I no longer know if I am binder or bound. Entry 20, Day 21, The Edge of the Veil. Tonight I speak the word that is never written. If I fail, I am lost. If I succeed, she will return, not as she was, but as she must be. Entry 21. The ritual. The flame went cold. Her eyes opened, black as obsidian. She did not speak, but I heard her, a song unfinished. I did not bind her to life, I bound her to remembrance. Final entry. Date unknown. I do not regret this, but I fear the weight of what I have awakened. The world will not forget her, and she will not be silent. Bloodvale Court. Case File 2. The Hollow Tongue. Chapter 1. The Ink-Bound Bell. The bell was never meant to ring again. It was cast in silence, sealed in scripture, lowered into the ground beneath the chapel of threads, a relic too dangerous to stand in air. It was not made of iron, nor bronze. Its body was black glass, veined with ink. The records say, 1 toll may bind, 2 tolls may erase, 3 towels shall remember what should not. The bell was kept under 7 locks, 7 words, 7 names scratched into its rim by scribes long dead. But last winter, it rang. The villagers swore they heard it at dusk, deep, low, trembling, like thunder held in the throat of the earth. They covered their ears, but the sound did not stop. It did not echo in the air, it echoed inside the bones. One woman bit through her tongue, another tore out her hair until her scalp bled. Children clawed at the walls, screaming for silence. When the toll ended, their mouths were no longer their own. Each time they tried to speak, another voice came through, crooked syllables, wet words that bent the air, a language no one had heard, yet every ear understood. They called it the hollow tongue, and every time it was spoken, ink bled from their lips. The magistrate sealed the village in parchment wards. Still, the language spread, written in the dirt, carved in the bark, whispered in dreams. I was sent with 2 others, Judge Eller, again presiding, and Agent Nall, bearer of iron gags and silence bindings. We descended into the chapel. The bell sat unshaken, black as the pit it slept in. But someone had drawn near, fresh footprints in the ash, fingertips on the dust, and a name, smeared across the wall in blood, Sarah Varn. Case File 2. The Hollow Tongue. Chapter 2. The Contagion of Speech. We thought the bell had rung once, but the truth is that it never stopped. The toll lived on in them, in the mouths of every villager who heard it. It carried itself forward in whispers, then in cries, then in things that weren't quite human words anymore. The first man we questioned was a blacksmith, his lips cracked with dried ink, his teeth stained like parchment burned at the edges. When asked his name, he opened his mouth, and 3 voices answered. One was his own, the second was a child's, the third was hollow, echoing from somewhere deep in his chest. Judge Eller ordered the iron gag placed at once. The blacksmith wept soundlessly as the chains locked across his jaw. Tears ran black down his cheeks. We thought it an isolated case, but the next villager spoke with 5 voices, the next with 7. By the time we reached the chapel doors again, one woman opened her lips and the air itself bent around her syllables. The plaster cracked, our lantern glass shattered. Agent Nall staggered back, blood running from his ears. The woman smiled, though her eyes were pleading, and the words that spilled out were not her own. Let us out. We gagged her too, but her throat pulsed beneath the iron, the words still pressing, still seething, as if the hollow tongue had grown organs of its own. That night, the contagion spread without speaking. Even in sleep, the villagers' tongues moved against our teeth. Even gagged, their throats whispered as if the air itself remembered how to shape the syllables. I dreamed the bell. It hung in darkness, never moving, yet the sound poured out of it endlessly, like water spilling through glass. I woke with my mouth bleeding ink. Case File 2. The Hollow Tongue. Chapter 3. The Writing of Flesh. By dawn, the chapel itself had changed. Walls that had been white were now streaked in black, like ink spilled from 1,000 tongues. The air smelled of ash and wet paper. It hummed faintly, as if the building itself were reciting a hymn only it could hear. The children were gone, or rather, they were present, but not present. Eyes closed, lips moving in a rhythm no human could follow. Their throats pulsed like drums, beating words into the air we could not catch. Agent Nall traced his fingers across one boy's arm. The skin was smooth, but beneath the surface, letters formed, black letters, curling and twisting under the flesh, spelling names no one remembered. He tried to write them down, The ink vanished before it could touch paper. Pause. We realized then, the hollow tongue did not speak. It wrote, through living bodies, through their mouths, their veins, their bones, every unspoken name, every forgotten grief, etched itself in flesh. One girl, Laura, opened her eyes at last. They were black, not empty, but wet, like obsidian reflecting fire. She raised her lips, whispered one word we could all understand, Ellen. Every chair in the chapel trembled. The bell spun silently above the cavern floor. Thread of red silk stretched from it to the ceiling, to walls, to the children themselves. The silk pulsed in time with their heartbeat. Scribe Ellen, young, eager, foolish, tried to speak. He choked, ink spilled from his mouth like blood, and then, carved into his tongue, a word, remember. We could not stop it. We tried words. We tried salt. We tried sealing the children in stone chambers. Every attempt failed. The hollow tongue was alive. It was memory made flesh, and it had chosen to speak through us. That night, I slept, or would pass for sleep. I dreamed of the bell spinning in endless black, and a single thought whispered in my marrow. We are all ink. We are all names. You cannot forget us? Case File 2, The Hollow Tongue. Chapter 4, The Librarian Without Eyes. The orphanage wing had reappeared. Not rebuilt, not restored, simply present. Bookshelves lined with tomes thought lost, lullabies for the unnamed dead, hymns for graves the world had forgotten. And there, at the threshold, stood a figure, draped in ceremonial robes, colors inverted, black where red should be, ash where gold marked rank. No eyes, only hollows filled with dried ink and lavender buds. When it moved, the air smelled of memory. We raised our seals. The figure bowed, bleeding red thread from its fingertips. It pointed at a single open book. The title read, The Book of Names Unspoken, a ledger of the lost, each page inked in blood, each entry signed by the forgotten. The last page was still wet, one word scrawled across it, Veyron. It did not speak, it did not need to. The names whispered themselves, through the ink, through the children, through us. I realized then that the hollow tongue had a librarian, not a keeper, not a witness, but a scribe of vengeance, feeding memory into life. The children moved in perfect unison, circling the figure, their mouths silent, their throats pulsing in rhythm with the bell above. We could not leave. Every door led back to the bell. Every step returned us to the ink-stained floor. And from the bell came the same word we had heard before, now a chant, remember. Case File 2, The Hollow Tongue. Chapter 5, Remembrance Bell. We tried to leave. The orphanage would not let us. Every corridor twisted back on itself. Every staircase returned us to the bell's cavern. Even outside, the wind carried its toll. The bell hung suspended above the cavern floor, spinning slowly on red threads, not swinging, not ringing, but we remembered. Memories that were not ours, names we had never written, graves we had never visited, children we had once abandoned, now alive in memory, calling to us. We were not meant to know these things, but the bell made sure we did. The children chanted silently, their mouths closed, throats beating in perfect rhythm, a chorus that held the weight of forgotten grief. I do not believe the bell is here. I do not believe the children are here. I believe we were the clapper. By the time we emerged, the court hall itself had shifted. The corridors were made of memory, not stone. The lamps flickered with the names. Our reflections whispered what we tried not to hear. The final report appeared on my desk the next morning, not written by my hand, signed by someone I no longer recognized. Bloodvale Court, Case File 2, The Hollow Tongue, Final Status, Active Breach, Echo Class, Recursive Mnemonic Entity, Primary Vector, Memory Bell, Secondary Vector, Children of the Ink Sworn, Subject Ellen Droska now listed under Crossfile Classification, Veil Linked Recurrent, Status, Present but Unplaceable. We asked for silence, we received memory, now we cannot stop hearing. Veyron, Scribe Third Order, submit this under black wax. My reflection no longer belongs solely to me. I hear her again, not Ash, not Ellen. The bell, it does not toll, it breathes, and I know what it wants. It wants to be answered. Bloodvale Court, Case File 3, Echo Garden. Chapter 1, The Garden That Wasn't. They said there was no garden. Old maps showed only salt flats and shallow graves east of Sindle's Hollow, barren soil, dead earth. nothing that could bloom. And yet, petals appeared, bone-wide at first, falling where no flowers grew. Children woke to swirl in their beds. Lanterns flickered with the scent of lavender and rot. Names whispered through keyholes. When the first child vanished, not taken, not dragged, but forgotten, the court was summoned, not with ink, not with parchment, but with a black blossom, left on the archive's doorstep, tied with red thread. Field Agent Merrick, Saltbinder, Vale Division, reported, "We arrived at the 9th bell of morning. The villagers met us in silence. Some coughed up sweat, some bled from the tongue. A woman pointed to the ground outside the village limits. The soil pulsed, it breathed, it bloomed." The court records note, "Memory grows in the soil where grief was denied." Bloodvale Court, Case File 3, Echo Garden. Chapter 2, The Names in Bloom. The garden was a spiral. Petals grew in perfect rings, wide at the edges, bone-colored toward the center, soot-dark in the heart, blacker than shadow, absorbing light. At the center, a cairn of mirrors, shards tied with red string, each reflected not the sky, but what lay beneath. Faces emerged, children we had forgotten, eyes like wet obsidian, watching, recognizing. Names we never wrote, graves we never visited, forgotten grief we had buried in duty. Scribe Elon's unsanctioned notes, partially recovered. I asked the salt to protect me, it melted. I asked the rites to ground me, they unraveled. The veil whispered, "This is what you bury beneath your duty." Each petal was a memory, each bloom, a voice, and as we touched them, the children in the village stirred, their mouths moved silently, throats pulsing with the rhythm of the garden itself. We began hearing names, not our own, not those we knew, names of children whose graves had never been marked, whose deaths had been erased, and with each name, we remembered things we had chosen to forget. One scribe collapsed after hearing the name of a girl he abandoned at the gates of a plague ward. Another burned his eyes out, whispering, "She waited for me to come back. I said I would." The garden did not grow in soil alone. It grew in memory. It bloomed in grief. And at the heart, the cairn of mirrors reflected a single, blackened figure. Ash, eyes black, mouth closed, hands folded. Her shadow spoke. "You called us echo, but we are not your reflection. We are your rot. You left us in silence. We bloom in remembrance. There are more of us, and you have more forgetting to answer for." Bloodvale Court, Case File 3, Echo Garden. Chapter 3, The Chorus of the Unnamed. By the 7th dusk, the garden had grown, not in soil, but in echo. We began hearing children's voices in the stillness, not crying, not laughing, naming, whispering names we could not trace in any archive, names never carved into markers, names we recognized anyway. Because the moment they were spoken, we remembered what we had buried in silence. One scribe collapsed after hearing the name of a child he abandoned at a quarantine ward. Another burned his eyes out, muttering, "She waited for me to come back. I said I would." The petals continued to spiral. Shards of mirror reflected not the sky, but the forgotten faces, the unmarked graves, the silent screams. And then we understood. This garden was no longer just ash. It was a chorus, a choir made of memory itself. Children began humming in unison, mouths closed, throats dry, but the sound persisted, a single word beneath their breath, "Remember." Scribe Elon's body was found later, red thread wound taut through her teeth, pulled down her throat, fresh ink tattooed across her chest, court script, lyrics of the red thread hymnal, signed beneath, Varnon, Barnabinder. Alumin Vale, former archivist, expelled, traced the garden's spread, not to contain it, to feed it. The echoes called him harvester. Within the court, a fracture had begun. The grey requiters, scribes who refused silence, began smuggling transcripts, carving lost names into iron tablets, burying them with salt and red thread beneath forgotten graves. Some tablets bloomed, some whispered, and the whispers said, "She is not alone anymore." Bloodvale Court, Case File 3, Echo Garden. Chapter 4, Fracture within the court. Not all judges agreed the file should remain sealed. A faction formed within the lower orders. They called themselves the Grey Requiters, scribes and agents who believed the court's long-standing practice of mourning through erasure had fed the echo's power. They began smuggling unsanctioned transcripts, carving lost names into iron tablets, burying them with salt and red thread beneath forgotten wells and unmarked graves. Some tablets bloomed, some whispered. The whispers said, "She is not alone anymore." Aluminvale moved openly, once a court archivist, now expelled. He did not attempt containment. He fed the garden, traced its growth, spread its memory. "We call him heretic," the echoes called him harvester. Tension exploded within the court. Judge Iller demanded a purge, immediate, merciless. The Grey Requiters argue that children were victims, shaped by grief, not controlling it. Vale delivered vials of garden soil, chanting whispered prayers. He said, "Memory cannot be caged. It will bloom, or be drowned beneath our silence." Chaos reigned, order fractured. Some scribes disappeared into their own archives, hearing the petals bloom behind every page. I, Veyron, began seeing mirrored petals in my tea, blood pooling into names I had never written. One bloomed behind my eye. I felt it press against the bone. I dreamed of the chapel again. Ash was absent, but what emerged from her shadow was everywhere. Bloodvale Court, Case File 3, Echo Garden. Chapter 5, The Hollow Choir. The court's halls had never felt so hollow. Reports poured in, towns waking to disembodied laughter, midnight choirs rattling in empty wells, names whispering through door cracks at dusk. The Echo Garden's influence had rippled far beyond Sindle's Hollow. It had become a chorus. Fragments of the Red Thread hymnal surfaced in city archives, unsanctioned melodies scrawled in margins, curtains moving as if held by unseen fingers, mirrors cracked from within. Judges found themselves mute when confronting the file. Investigations revealed a pattern, 17 children across 5 provinces sang at the exact same moment, visits to Vale Chambers drained guards' voices. When they choked, they could only repeat one word, remember, hymnal fragments inscribed in Bonnebinder's tools and Vale steel chains. These children, the Hollow Choir, were agents of memory reborn, yet instruments of something darker. Varen's dispatch arrived at dawn. They are no longer souls in mourning or remembrance. They are bridges, chants made flesh, memory unwillingly given voice. Across the duchy, people remembered things they never experienced, fears, regrets, names they never knew they forgot. The choir's song was not a lullaby, it was a summons. From the mirror root score, a voice echoed, "When the choir sings, the Vale listens." This was not revival, this was reclamation. Tension exploded within the court. Judge Iller demanded immediate purge. The Grey Requiters argued that children were victims. Aluminvale delivered vials of garden soil, chanting, "Memory cannot be caged. It will either bloom, or be drowned beneath our silence." The choir began to march. They left Sindle's Hollow, walking east in perfect, silent lines. Towns along their path broke into involuntary memory, a mother saw her child's unmarked grave in her reflection, a former archivist awoke speaking an extinct morning tongue, entire libraries of erased names reappeared in nighttime dreams. On the 6th dusk, they reached the Vale Vault's brass door. Then they sang, and the vault wept.